When I graduated from college in 1981, I moved right to San Francisco, and it was amazing. For the first time in the history of the planet, there were a few whole blocks in which people like me were in the majority, and we could hold hands, and we could form choruses and advocacy groups and feel normal and most of the time safe. It was in this same safe space of San Francisco that 12 years later, my friends Jerry and Erwin and Maurice and Abato and I proudly formed the trashy group that I still can't believe people actually pay to see. Of course, by 1993, San Francisco was no longer safe. By then, nearly 250,000 Americans, most of them gay and bi men, had died of AIDS, and San Francisco was the epicenter. When I look back, I can't believe how normal it became to be in my 20s and so unable to keep up with the sheer volume of people who were dying that every week I had to run out and get the local gay rag and look through multiple pages of obituaries just to see who I knew. And yet, if I traveled a few miles away, it was as if it weren't happening at all. It was like Syria was across the street, but nobody noticed. But as painful as all the dying was knowing that so many people wanted us to die. They were enraged that the faggots would no longer just shut up, and they wanted us to disappear, and they wanted us to suffer. And when I say they, I don't mean just some lunatic fringe. I'm talking about respected Republican senators and governors and their so-called Christian allies, and yes, the sainted Ronald fucking Reagan, who couldn't even get himself to say the word AIDS for 6 years into the epidemic. Gay and bi and trans people, poor blacks and Latinos, we weren't part of their America, and if we were dying, shit happens. But we weren't just left to die. No. We came in handy. Republican politicians drummed up people's fear of AIDS and their hatred of us, and they used that to win elections. My friends' painful, terrifying deaths were nothing more to them than a political opportunity. So they talked about quarantine. They said that AIDS was God's punishment. They made jokes about us at the White House. They said that we were a threat to their families, even though we were their families. And the meanwhile, people like me had to raise money from other beleaguered people like me and work round the clock and have nervous breakdowns, doing everything we could to try to stop them when all we wanted was to stay alive and get some help. Don't hear about this much now. You probably didn't hear about it much then if you weren't part of our community. If a freak falls in the forest, does it make a sound? When the Kinsey Sicks formed at work, I was maniacally organizing the first national conference on HIV prevention in the LGBT community, which took place exactly 2 weeks after the Kinsey Sicks' first street performance in July '94. Now, I want this to sink in. This was 13 years into the AIDS crisis when we finally got the government to cough off its first penny to bring people together to discuss, hey, how might we prevent the spread of AIDS among queers? Maybe those fairies have some special needs that should be addressed. And every penny that we raised for that conference, I had to fight for. And every person that we kept alive during those years and every right that we secured since then was because we insisted on our worth. Gay marriage? I love gay marriage. But that right was won on the backs of hundreds of thousands of dead gay men. The best of my generation. Whose dying pierced our invisibility and whose humanity slowly wore down people's fear of us despite the Republican Party's best efforts. I got my very first death threat right before I graduated from college. It was in response to a Boston Globe article about my organizing of a gay rights protest at my college graduation. Well, Harvard was so deeply concerned for my safety that they graciously offered to fly me home. I just as graciously declined, pulled off my protest, thank you very much, and graduated on June 4th, 1981. The very next day, the first scientific article appeared about a mysterious illness among homosexual men. And of course, we had no idea what was about to hit us. But in the nightmare that followed, I became friends with a lead author of that article, Dr. Joel Weissman. Joel later became a major Kinsey Sicks fan and was one of the first people to work to produce us off-Broadway. Oh my God. We were so excited. There was a huge New York Times profile about us. There was a major national TV segment due to air the day of our first production meeting, September 11th, 2001. Somehow, we made it to that meeting, and the four of us, as well as our executive producer and her dear friend and office mate, huddled by the TV and watched as that second tower fell with her best friend and his wife inside. So, I'm not going to complain that our show closed because I'm here to talk about it. Historic events change our lives, and we are living in a historic event, and we have the responsibility to try to shape that event and not just watch it happen. For so many people, government is this abstract, distant thing, but that thing determines who lives and who dies, who matters and who's just shit. Ask the folks in Flint, Michigan. Ask the people in Puerto Rico. Ask the infants and toddlers ripped from their parents at the border by a government that didn't even care enough to keep track of where they are or even who they are. So, I've been talking mostly about 1981 and 93, 94. In between, in 1985, I graduated from law school and became, at the ripe old age of 26, the first and, at that point, only attorney in the U.S. working full-time nationally on AIDS discrimination cases. At home, I have folders full of clippings about landmark lawsuits filed, about desperate community organizing, about government officials pleaded with and condemned, and thank God for the files, because I've blocked most of it out. It's hard for the brain to tell the coherent story about something that your heart is still desperately trying to forget. But I do remember the weight of all the people I couldn't help, the calls I couldn't even answer from people who are fighting to stay alive while they're being kicked out of their homes or their jobs or off their insurance plans. I remember some beautiful and brave clients and colleagues and friends and roommates and boyfriends. And there was work to be done. And I had a Harvard law degree that gave me just enough respectability that when the cameras came by and I slipped into my lawyer drag, I managed to pull off my first TV role. Non-threatening and appealing homosexual. Sure, my job was to explain that panic and discrimination were dangerous, but my real job was to go on TV and be a nice young man who you didn't want to see die. So I did what I had to. Funny how being an appealing homosexual became less appealing to me since. But I do have one appeal, and that's to my generation of gay and bi men. We carry so many dead on our backs. It's a wonder we can walk at all, and we don't talk about it. Recently, a good friend said to me, "Did I ever mention that my first husband died?" No, he hadn't mentioned it, and he didn't have to say what. It was unspoken. So much is unspoken. But when and if you can, honor those you loved by daring to remember them. Imagine what your life would be like if they were still alive. Imagine what the world would be like if they were still alive. And as long as we're alive, let's not let others forget them. Don't let the world make this our shameful secret. We are not the ones who should be ashamed. All our lives, we've been told what not to say. Well, sometimes those are the things that most need to be said. I've been waiting 25 years to say